With its lush rice paddies, mystical mountains, and millennia-old culture, Vietnam was a peaceful paradise in Southeast Asia. These lands, believed to be descended from dragons, had shaped their own destiny for centuries, hosting powerful empires. However, in the mid-19th century, French steamships appearing on the horizon brought a new era, the dark shadow of colonialism, to these ancient lands. This was the beginning of a resistance that would rise from bamboo forests and rice fields, challenging the world's most powerful armies. France's arrival in Vietnam began under the pretext of protecting Catholic missionaries. However, the real aim was to seize Southeast Asia's rich resources, rice, rubber, coal, and strategic location. The invasion, which began with the first attacks on Da Nang in 1858, gradually led to the establishment of French Indochina, encompassing all of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. The French reshaped the region to their own interests by overthrowing local administrations and establishing their own bureaucracy. The first resistance against the French occupation was shown by the last emperors of the Nguyen dynasty and the local population. However, regular resistance quickly crumbled against the superior firepower and organized army of the French. Nevertheless, the Vietnamese began to develop guerrilla warfare tactics, utilizing the advantage of forests and swamps. Small, mobile units inflicted continuous losses on the colonial forces by ambushing French convoys, and with the support of the local population. The French resorted to brutal methods to suppress the resistance. Villages were burned, rebels were executed, and intense pressure was exerted on the population. By 1887, Vietnam was completely under French control. While the country's riches flowed to France, the Vietnamese people were condemned to live in poverty and misery. During this period, the lands and cultural identity of the Vietnamese were largely destroyed. Under French colonial rule, Vietnam became merely a source of raw materials and a market. Millions of Vietnamese, forced to work like slaves in rice and rubber plantations, perished from hunger and disease. French education was imposed, local traditions were scorned, and attempts were made to suppress the national consciousness of the people. Thousands died in infrastructure projects under the forced labor system called corvée. These years left deep scars in the memory of the Vietnamese people. World War II marked a turning point for Vietnam. Japan's occupation of the region weakened French authority. In this vacuum, the Viet Minh movement, led by Ho Chi Minh, gained strength. In 1945, with Japan's surrender, Ho Chi Minh declared the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. However, France returned to re-establish its colonial empire. This situation plunged Vietnam into a new and bloodier struggle. France's attempt to reoccupy triggered the First Indochina War, 1946-1954. Viet Minh guerrillas, under the leadership of General Vo Nguyen Giap, put up an epic resistance against the French army. The turning point of the war was the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The fortified French base was besieged and captured by the Viet Minh after heavy losses. This victory led to France's withdrawal from Indochina, and North Vietnam gained its independence. However, Vietnam's fate was not yet sealed. The country was divided into North and South, and the United States intervened in the war, supporting South Vietnam to prevent the spread of communism. The Second Indochina War, Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, became one of the bloodiest conflicts in history. The modern U.S. Army turned Vietnam into hell with napalm bombs, chemical weapons, and intense air raids. Approximately 3 million Vietnamese lost their lives. The country's infrastructure completely collapsed, and its lands were poisoned. The price of freedom was unimaginably heavy. The long and grueling war led to a major public outcry in the U.S. In 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed, and American forces withdrew from Vietnam. However, the war did not end. The North Vietnamese Army launched a major offensive against South Vietnam. On April 30, 1975, Saigon fell, and Vietnam was completely unified. This went down in history as one of the greatest defeats a superpower suffered against a small nation. With the fall of Saigon, the Vietnamese people finally gained their freedom after many years of war. The streets were filled with celebrations, Vietnamese flags waved, and the people experienced the pride of a unified nation. Although a devastated country was inherited, the Vietnamese people worked with great determination to be reborn from their ashes. This victory became a symbol of resistance against colonialism and imperialism for the entire world. Vietnam's story showed the world the resilience of the human spirit and the power of the desire for freedom. It proved how a handful of peasants could achieve victory against the world's most powerful armies. Today, Vietnam is a rising nation with the legacy of its independence. So, what kind of resistance epic was written in another giant of Asia, under the shadow of the empire on which the sun never sets? In our next video, we will witness India's struggle for independence. Stay tuned.